Can I ask you about a couple of issues on the foreign policy front? Because if you were president now in the second half of your second term and you were facing down the Russian bear and there was a humanitarian crisis in Syria and terrorism on the rise in Nigeria and the Middle East peace talks had just collapsed and they were raising Benghazi again as a foreign policy issue, in what order would you try to tackle them? And is any of it leave room for growth or hope or possibility?
All right, folks, that's Gwen Ifill questioning Bill Clinton yesterday at the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, their fiscal summit. And joining us now to talk about what Bill Clinton is about to say is Rich Miniter, terrorism expert, author, best-selling author. Latest book is Eyes on Target. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good to be with you.
Good to talk to you. All right, I want to go over in these couple of segments here that we have usually reserved for the panel. I wanted an expert to talk about and critique what Bill Clinton is going to say, because what he's going to say, what we're going to hear, is surely what Hillary is going to be saying in the not too distant future when it comes to Benghazi, whether it's at the Select Committee panel if she's questioned or during the campaign. And I thought this was kind of fascinating insight. First of all, you heard Bill Clinton was asked about a lot of different issues, and he then goes on to separate Benghazi. Let's play the next one.
Benghazi is a whole different deal.
I know, but I just threw it in there.
We did, in my opinion, Hillary did what she should have done. She impaneled a very high-level review committee with the immediate past chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, who's backstage, and Tom Pickering, our country's most distinguished senior diplomat, who's worked for more Republicans than Democrats in his life. And they looked into what was wrong. They gave 29 recommendations. She took them and started implementing them.
Okay, so first he talks about the panel, or the committee, or the group that wrote the report and made recommendations. But of course, the flaw there is that, among others, they never spoke to Hillary Clinton.
That's right. And they interview a number of other key sources. And for example, we don't know where the president was in those key hours. We only saw one press release from the White House on September 11, 2012, and it's not about Benghazi. It's about an hour-and-a-half phone call President Obama had with Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to settle a flap that had begun earlier that day. So while Americans are fighting and dying in Benghazi, the president is on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel talking about a totally unrelated matter, trying to reassure his re-election prospects.
Right.
Hillary also has not explained why she ignored 3 intelligence reports that circulated in the months prior to the attack that showed an al-Qaeda buildup in, get ready for it, Benghazi. Those reports also had pictures of an al-Qaeda military parade involving hundreds of armed militants and included a death threat against the U.S. ambassador there. So they had ample warning, and yet she kept reducing the guards. Finally, the committee has never, the House Select Committee may well get into this, but Hillary's committee did not interview the Libyans. Libyan intelligence has a great wealth of material that shows that the Libyan intelligence had been warning the U.S. about an al-Qaeda buildup, and that they correctly labeled it an al-Qaeda attack while the attack was still going on.
Yeah, virtually nobody who was on the ground and nobody in charge was interviewed in this report that Bill Clinton is touting. Now, let's move on, because now he talks about her responsibility as Secretary of State when it comes to providing security, and then he'll imply, Rich, that there were well-armed. 2 of the dead were well-armed, and they represented a force of 20 that in effect, there was security. So this is going to be interesting. Listen to this.
And they established the fact that whether it was right or wrong in the past, secretaries of state never were involved directly in these security decisions. And they also have untangled what was an early mystery at Benghazi, when all we knew was that 4 people were killed, and we know now 2 of them were heavily armed CIA contractors who were military combat veterans, and they were part of a group of 20 authorized to provide security, among other things, where they were in Benghazi.
All right, so let's take that backwards. I mean, this is a new slant that, oh boy, yeah, you know, two of those dead were well armed, and they were part of a group of 20 that were there for security, maybe not at the moment. So really, he's saying there was security. And by the way, secretaries of state traditionally have nothing to do with security.
Well, that is a lie that makes the word Clinton-esque seem insufficient somehow. First of all, Glenn Doherty and Ty Wood, the two combat veterans he's talking about, the former Navy SEALs who are working as CIA contractors, one was based with the rest of the CIA team a mile from the State Department's villa in Benghazi. The other came on a plane from Tripoli, hundreds of miles away and across the Gulf of Sidra from Benghazi. So a distance of basically going from D.C. to New York, just to put that in perspective. So the idea that they were there to somehow provide security when they weren't on the scene and had arrived during in the course of the 8-hour battle for the lives of those more than 40 Americans trapped there is at the very best misleading. But this does show if there is a Clinton campaign, what kinds of claims they're going to make to try to throw mud up and confuse the American people about this matter.
Yeah, that's why I thought this whole thing was so fascinating, and that's why I wanted you on here to talk about it. And when we continue, Rich, we're going to hear about Clinton invoking the 1988 embassy bombings in Africa. Of course, he was president at the time. And also talking about Chris Stevens' popularity and what role that played into it, and maybe a justification for not feeling that more security was required. So stay where you are. We're talking Rich Miniter, a terrorism expert, best-selling author, his new one, and we've had him and his co-author on to talk about this a couple of times already, Eyes on Target. Make sure you get a hold of that. Fascinating publication. And we will have part 2 and hear the rest of what Bill Clinton had to say. And again, this comes on the heels of Hillary Clinton the other day saying, sure, you know, I had regrets, and sure, that we could do it over. So they're starting to come up with exactly what they're going to say going forward. And I think this is fascinating. We're getting the first glimpse of just that. So keep it tuned right here. Now, I want to know what you think about today's hot news topics like this. Let us know. You can follow us on Twitter at NewsmaxTV. Email us at connect@newsmax.com. or comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/NewsmaxTV. And that's a lot to take in. I hope you got it all. You know what? Write it on your hand next time so you'll never forget it. We're coming back. Don't go away.